Hello and welcome to Speightstown, a forgotten treasure. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Once again, I'm glad you've joined us. In our last program, we continue our look at the streetscape of the town, making mention of some of the many buildings that line the street, those buildings which lend themselves to that special scape. The activities that occurred in some of these buildings were detailed. Attention was called to the dilapidated state of one of the government buildings, the Galeen, and 3 of the town fires were also detailed. In this week's program, we will look at what drove the town and kept it going, the engine of Speightstown.
Speightstown used to be really lively, and lots of people on the streets, up and down. You're seeing people on the streets, and at least in my time, it wasn't like no fussing. No, we never also had like disputes and stuff. So everybody was, it was a more together thing. There was more love in that time. You could walk freely. Yeah, people would share things with one another.
People knew everybody.
People knew everybody. Yeah.
That was Speightstown of the 1960s and the early 1970s. You would recall that in a previous program, Pastor Cara Richards, Peggy McGarry, Dorian Davis, Hazel Burnett and Renell McLean all presented Speightstown of the preceding years. We move along now with accounts of the decades after the 1970s and beyond. There seemed to be an agreement that this town was driven by families.
Coming to Speightstown in the early days was, what I would say, they had much vehicles and students do a lot of walking, and to me it was more like everybody knows somebody would ever get a drop, somebody would, and majority they only had like 2 supermarkets. They had Eddie's Shower was short right here, and they had Jordan's further down, but before they had Jordan's, they actually had Almer's in early time, right?
The athletes, they had supermarket, the Jordans, the Worlds, the Rolex. This town was driven by family. Into this modern day life, I scaling fish. I didn't want my son to be scale and go on the fish. I got a ram shot. I didn't want my son to be a ram shot. You got a degree. But you should run it by me because you got a degree.
Well, in my boy days, there were 3 people in Speightstown that we would call the poor people that were for poor people, that no matter what. There was a guy, and he used to be right here at one time too. I don't know if you remember Wally's store. He used to be right here at the corner.
Wally's Enterprises on Church Street, just across from the parish church, has done extremely well. You know, many boys and girls and many parents sent their children to school from Wally's.
I can remember, like, when we was going to church, and like, that's my boy days now. Because like, when excursions and stuff or anything like come up, my mother used to take me and everybody to Wally's, and every person coming out outfitted for the excursion. And at that time, you know, you can't buy things in cash. So that was the work. So that even with school, I mean, like, when it comes to school, everybody also had everything. Wally's must make sure, and you know, you could pay and things to heat. I
remember getting my shoes and clothing when I was going to secondary school from Wally's. And Wally's did something that was very awesome back in the day. He would allow you to take the clothes and pay weekly. And that helped a lot of individuals. He's still there, still basically doing some of the same things.
He's the best man. I don't know he still do it. He's one of the cornerstones in Speightstown. He's one of the people that really had Speightstown, like, as far as traffic, because people can afford no, and want anything to know wants to go to Wally's. He never turn it back, won't refuse it. You know what I'm saying? Wally's was a good man.
You got the Indian man there, Banner, who was in Speightstown even before me. Even before you were born, we come out always hear about Banner. And I mean, possibly now, but you know, his family, his story is still there, and he helped a lot of people. I mean, I know that some of my mother would have passed there early time, and she may not got all the money or whatever, but you know, he would know her by name or whatever. He would pay later. Down here now is just, as the youngster would say, dead.
Roller, by Roller up there, his father. You could get your plumbing 7 days a week. And your pipe burst in the middle of the night, then come out and give you something.
Mr. Rollup was such a sweet person. When you bought things from him, he would say, would you like a sweet or would you like a lollipop? And he would always, he would say to you, oh, if there are any sweets you want, just open the jars, and the jars were these special jars that lit. You know, they sort of, the bottom was not, they didn't sit up right, they sat at an angle. And you could just unscrew them and take out. Of course, you were very, very cautious not to overdo it because you wanted to go another time. And you could find everything in that store. Saucepans, butt pots, all the things that you use in your kitchen. And if it was something that was locally made, you know, like those, what we call rangers, that 3 baking pans that were together, he would acquire them from the local tinsmith and sell them in his shop. He sold pencils, he sold stationery, he sold paints and varnishes, he sold kites, and he sold sweets. He sold just about everything. I can't think of anything that he didn't sell. Bicycle parts. I don't know if he had car parts too, because I would have had to need that, but everything. And he had this massive storeroom behind the actual store. So if there was something you wanted, he would either send an assistant or he would go himself and rummage through until he found it, and he came back very often with what you wanted. All right? So that store, it just, everything you wanted, you could get. Anything you wanted, you could get. I mean, even there was a time when I went there and I saw him selling, you know, the things that the farmers use for the chicken farmers, for the animals, for the chickens to feed from. That was in there. Anything that you wanted, if he did not have it, he would acquire it and bring it. He always used to talk about food. And the thing I remember him talking about the most was something that I hated, turtle soup. I remember him talking about loving turtle soup, and there was another soup he loved, cow heel soup. He always talked about turtle soup and cow heel soup. And I wondered why he would want to eat that, because I would see that and it didn't look like anything that was too appetizing. So he was so tall. He was extremely tall, elegant, as we would say, brown-skinned person, and very, very, very fine features.
Now, we heard earlier of the Noel Roach Pharmacy and the charitable manner in which he operated his business here in Speightstown, providing the prescribed medication. The point being made here is that he too drove this town. Today, a number of medical facilities are situated around Speightstown. Now, if you are ill, you drive yourself or you are driven to one of the medical centers for attention. Now, was this the situation in the past? Who provided medical attention for the people of Speightstown, and how was this done?
We have Mr. Gilmore, Dr. Gilmore, left home at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to any sick person. That was driven in town. We don't have that in town now. Everybody comes collecting rent. Who own a building, they rent it out in spaces, collect rent. But the day then dead, their legacy gone. Because they have not do anything, because they don't understand what they have.
Even if they rent it out at an excessive rate that you can't really actually go for. And I find a lot of people in Speightstown now really shy away, because businesses, I saw from over years, I saw a lot of business that come and go. I mean, people I thought that would do better. I don't know if it's the area. I don't know if it's transportation. I don't know if what they were selling, if it's not the right things. But I just see them coming and going. And for me, as someone who been looking at Speightstown for a long time, I think that some of the business that they bring Speightstown, from my opinion, I don't think they need it. Because everybody bringing clothes. And as you say, wanting people to buy clothes, no people buy necessities.
Well, that's the reality of things. Now, if everyone is bringing clothes, most likely you could expect some footwear also. Today you can walk around and be sure to find a pair of shoes at one of the few remaining establishments here in Speightstown. But as you would learn now, this is not quite what attained in earlier days.
Mr. Watson, in my times, because I was born in 1963, so he had to do work for me, because in them earlier times, it wasn't really a lot of stuff, I think. And he was very good Because if your bag, your school bag, if you need hand or your shoes and things burst out, at that time you know your mother, you can't, that time your mother got about 3 or 4 more that got sent to school and things, so you couldn't afford anything. So in them times it was repairs and things that you used to have met them last week a while, like as far as you know, and fix them again. When it comes to shoes, Watson was the man. Watson.
So whenever the boys passed, I would do the shoes free. Right now, there is a gentleman that has retired. He worked at the bank. I'm not calling his name. That when he was a boy, his grandmother raised him, and one day he brought, one from CP, he brought the shoes to me and said, "Mr. Watson, my grandmother tell you to patch the shoes for me, that I can get it to wear to school Monday morning, but she tell you she ain't got no money to pay yet." I took the shoes and I put a new brown pair of half soles on them, and I told him, "Tell your grandmother that whenever your shoes want repairing, send them down to me and I will repair them." And I continued to do that for several children. And today there are big people who went to England. There are people who in big government service. When I see them, they'll say, "Hey Watson, hi, how you doing, man? You know, you did this thing for me 40 years ago. You did this thing for me." You understand? Yeah. And that thing continues. Up to last week, a chap came here from England, and when he stepped in the door, he said, "Hello, Mr. Watson. You can remember me?" I look at him and I say, "I think I know your face, but the name got me. Man, you can't remember doing my shoes for me 40 years ago at CP." I'm sitting there, I said, "Oh, you?" He said, "Yeah, yes, I got you." He said, "Man, you continue, man, I'm so glad to see you. I came in yesterday and I told the others home I'm going to Speightstown today because I must see Mr. Watson."
All the school shoes, leather belts, bags, any kind of thing like that at Horsery.
Oh, Mr. Watson, that shop is that was the place where politics was discussed, local activities were discussed, everything, cricket was discussed. If you wanted an education about anything, you listened to what the men and some women who used to sit in Watson's shop. But Watson's shop never allowed any cursing and bad talking in the shop. Always admired him for that. But he could turn out the finest shoes. Once he got your measurement, he could turn out the finest school shoes, and they did not grow in a hurry. Your feet would grow out of those shoes before the shoes, you know? And very often they got passed on to somebody else. I was the last child, so I don't know where mine went, but mine disappeared from around the place. But he used to fit you out with shoes, or if you had shoes to be repaired, oh, he could make them look like new again. He's still doing that. He is still doing that. And I so admire him. He is always a very polite person, always willing to help out, always willing to give, and just another amazing person who influenced my life. And that, even now, if I want shoes fixed, I still come to Speightstown to get my shoes fixed. I still come to Mr. Watson. And he always says to me, "Oh, it is so nice to see you." And you know, so we would go back and talk about old days, and he's so much older than I am. So there was always something to learn from Mr. Watson. He was, you know, he was really amazing. His children went to school with me at Alexandra, and oh, he was another amazing person, I think, who had a really great impact on Speightstown. His generosity and his willingness to assist and to help and to work honestly, and you know, but the level of conversation in that shop, they were always discussing politics, they were always discussing, when cricket was on, you know, they were arguing. At the time I was so small, I didn't even know what MCC meant. And they were talking about MCC and Australia, and I would listen carefully and try to understand what they were talking about, because I really did not understand cricket for a very, very long time. But I understood a lot from listening to what they were talking about in there, and I could never understand them talking about spin, you know, and why you had to hold the ball a particular way, and about the speed that this person was bowling at. And I think somewhere in the 1950s, I remember them talking about the whole issue of cricket being, it was not just a game, it is a whole issue of politics, and it's time for us to, you know, to stop depending on these people who couldn't, because I think at the time the West Indies cricket team was white, a lot of white people in a few, and I think a lot of the arguments surrounded the appointment of Worrell as captain of the cricket team. And I think, you know, there was such jubilation at that, I remember, around the shop, because he didn't work very far up the road, and it was a place that you passed going to another shop higher up the road to buy some little specialties that we used to get called ice cream blocks. We would go up to a shop, but you pass there, and sometimes you just stopped by that shop to hear him. And there was another gentleman who lived across the road from his shop called Mr. Waterman, who was another outstanding person who always had good advice for young people. He had 2 beautiful daughters, and those daughters, you know, he always looked out for them, and they were my friends, and he always tried to encourage us.
Mr. Watson can still be found on Church Street doing his work, but of course you would appreciate that with added years he is not working at the pace which he worked with many years ago. All is not lost. The craftsmanship of the cobbler continues here in historic Speightstown.
Now we got a few there to take out by these stores. You know, we got about 4 or so up there now, and really and truly, them is a great help. Them is a great help in Speightstown.
Now, speaking about the humanitarian effort and what drove this town, Peggy McGeary details the charitable nature of some of the other residents.
So many outstanding people in Speightstown, and I'm talking here about the local, just ordinary people. But of course, you know, outside of them, there were people like KNR Husbands, who was the first black speaker of the House of Assembly, who lived just up the road from where I lived as well. He was an outstanding person from, you know, his political career. He was one of the outstanding people in Speightstown. Of course, after he ended politics, he went into teaching. And of course, around Speightstown, there was also Lee Cox School. She was another, went into politics, but is essentially a teacher and a head teacher. And that school she had for so long, and that also made a significant impact on a number of persons in Speightstown, in and around Speightstown, and beyond Speightstown. Miss Leacock was an outstanding person in the way that she encouraged young people to do well and all of that. But she was another very, very outstanding person. Speightstown was full of really great people when you stop to think of it, and they helped to mold and to shape your thinking. And you know, making me, you know, just talking with you and going back, you're realizing that there were so many of them. And in their own way, I mean, even fishermen. I remember a fisherman, I do not know his correct name, but we used to call him Bradman. And Bradman, dark, very, very dark, and bow-legged, but he was very forthright. And he would say, listen, don't do anything to mess up your life. And he would tell young people things like that and things like that. But there was always this friendliness, and everybody always looked out for others. I'm not saying that there were never skirmishes between people. Yes, there was that too, but not a lot of it, at least not that I was aware of, you know. But it was a wonderful place, really a wonderful place to grow up, and you felt the warmth of people. People encouraged you a lot. I remember people saying to me, you know, things like, when you grow up, you should try and learn well so that when you grow up, you can do this. And they would they would paint all these pretty pictures of all the things you can do. And sometimes the pictures weren't even in my head, but then, you know, that is something I would like to do. Maybe I would like to do that.
In addition to the generosity of politicians, teachers and fishermen, many children here in Speightstown were the beneficiary of the benevolence of Miss Briggs.
Miss Briggs, she was outstanding, a mulatto woman with long plaits that reach all the way down, and she was another great encourager, just a woman selling from a tray, and she would call you and ask you questions, and she would say to you, you're okay with lunch? And if you said no, she was calling you and a little sweet bread went in, and you know, people like that were, I don't know, I believe there's still people like that around, everywhere. There's still people like that everywhere. But there was an abundance of them. And I don't know if it's because Speightstown seemed for a long time to be more or less isolated from Bridgetown, but Speightstown had its own character, and it must be this serenity of spirit that New York Times or the correspondent spoke about. And there was always this need to encourage people and make them feel as though you can achieve something that was really great.
In a previous program, a mention was made of the circumstance surrounding the creation of this esplanade. It was more than a public space where residents recreated themselves or engaged in debates. It became Speightstown's center for the dissemination of information in forms other than the literary format. It was right here where many, for the first time, saw the telecommunication medium that is used for transmitting and receiving sound and moving images.
I mean, just sitting here in the Esplanade now brings back memories of the mobile cinema, watching Bud and Lou, and getting good information about hurricanes and how to protect yourself and how to prepare for hurricanes. I remember one that they showed called A Lady Called Camille. And you know, we was wondering, who is this Camille? But they were showing us footage from a hurricane called Camille, and it was a terrifying hurricane. And you know, but you got a lot of education, and very often they would show those educational things, and then you got Bud and Lou after, or some other comic that, you know, made everybody laugh. I am not sure that those sorts of things will make people laugh now, but certainly. And people came from all, you know, Mile and Quarter and Ashton, and they walked down, because especially if it were moonlight night, it was so much fun walking back afterwards. And if it were during the crop time, it was a wonderful time that people used to go and help themselves to some cane. I did not have to pass by cane, I just lived around the corner. So I was not one of those. Yeah, the Esplanade was a special place. And of course, when television first came to Barbados, there was a television set right there in the corner of the Esplanade. People sat in the Esplanade, watched television till it went off. That television was there for years.
As we sit here, this was like Speightstown theatre. Even when certain men 6 o'clock and everybody coming in, and men just in position, men picking up position, and they had the TV at the front.
Nobody ever touched it, nobody ever moved it. All people did was turn it on and turn it off. I think there was a little case that they used to keep over it to protect it from the salt spray. But it's amazing, you know, to leave a television out like that in a town. Nobody interfered with it. And
all the people in the community, you know, sir. And all those things, right, is what is bring a community closer together. You know. We want back things, I don't know exactly the same thing, but we need things like that.
Now you got Esplanade, you never got TV down there, and you got, as you're saying, the Esplanade upgrade. You got it play around, it got good seating and whatever, but you still don't got no boy down there. You understand me? So is it we upgrading for the better, or are we upgrading because it look good?
Chinese built and you got dodge around here, not to see anybody on stage. Built the same height the Chinese. But when Chinese are tall and the things are high. So here tall man, we got the people so to say boy performing. Everything was done wrong. But nobody can say.
To me, it's a waste of money. We need to come as you're doing right now, walk around, talk to some people who be expecting a lot, and see what they really need. I mean, ain't everything that you're gonna want, that people say you're gonna get, but see what they really need, see what the strong points.
Speightstown is a very beautiful place, is a It's lovely town, but it's gone dead because we don't get traffic. So I know it can't get back exactly as it was. But I would like to see Speightstown be a town again at least. Because we got so many beautiful things down here. I mean, it has real potential.
As I told from before, we got some fella who know come on market, and we got a festival in St. Peter, and Sunday the people in Hawkers in St. Peter, it has a festival will be Saturday, and by Friday you don't even know. And we got one that be a fella when it start this year, when it done now, as it finish, you hear about it in next year already. Understand? So that way telling you, are we doing the right things in Speightstown? Are we really coming together in Speightstown? Are we really looking up for people in Speightstown? Or are we just we call it a town, but we ain't got a town? To me, call a town more established than Speightstown. It might sound funny, but everybody, because we going beside here, the lowest road in Barbados from Bristol to Corntown, from this place to Corntown established. Speightstown, where's Speightstown?
It is Barbados' second town situated in the sheltered northwestern bay in the parish of St. Peter. And for that reason and others, this television program was conceptualized and produced to put Speightstown on the map again, so that no one in Barbados should ever have to ask such a question. Until next week at the same time, on air and online, I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Good evening.